Okay, here we go. Hello guys, hope you're having a good week. Thank you so much for tuning in to our weekly chat. Let me do this post. Pin that. Thank you for tuning in weekly, as I've said. I'm Hillary, founder of the FASHIONbytes platform. We're here to support and nurture creative entrepreneurs, filling in the gap between what happens in real life and education. This is our way to connect, collaborate, and share. While we're waiting for Julia just to pop on, we usually have educational panel discussions with industry experts on how to run your creative business. Mainly fashion, but some things can be across all industries. For example, finance and PR and marketing. And it's quite important to understand the various components and roles you have to play while running your business. No job is too big or too small. And if you have, if you've missed, I'm trying to get my wording here. If you've missed any of our chats, they're available to catch up on IGTV. We're so excited to talk about Fashion Week that's just gone with Julia. I think I can see her. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to pop them in, because I'm open to making sure that everyone gets all the information that they need from these chats that we're doing. It's all about providing information and connecting in the same way we would, hopefully, if we were in person. FASHIONbytes, we've been around for a little while, and we are hoping that the current situation passes and we can get back to whatever normal is, or adjust to whatever normal is going to be, so we can provide, a very good service and talk to brands and designers about how their business are doing and going, and how we can all move forward positively. Here we are. Let's get Julia on. Yeah, it would be great for us to just be settled and move forward. Here she is. Hello.
Hello, how are you, Hillary?
Good. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. I'm very well.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you.
It's a pleasure.
So before we jump into the many questions that I have, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name's Julia Robson, and I'm a seasoned fashion journalist, shall we say. So I studied fashion, and originally I thought I wanted to be a designer. And then I worked out that I was really curious and nosy about it, and I was probably better at writing about it than actually making it. So I worked on magazines, and then I went on to a newspaper called the Daily Telegraph for about 15 years. And I've subsequently been freelance, but I write mainly for newspapers all over the world, really, and internationally. And I sort of consider myself as a fashion reporter. But I also understand that with that comes responsibility. And so I was kind of trained as a journalist first and foremost, who then writes about fashion. And that's how I like to see myself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So let's just get right to it. How did you find the hybrid fashion week? The combo of digital and physical. How was that for you?
Yeah, well, the phygital, yeah, I understand. I think we've got to look at it in context. So it's kind of maybe what not a lot of designers would have chosen in the real world. But funnily enough, I was writing a piece for the Daily Mail, which came out last week on the eve of London Fashion Week. And I spoke to a lot of younger designers as well as established designers. And actually, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because many of them were going out there and showing their work online through a digital platform to people that they would never have shown off before. And so I know it's not a catwalk show. You know, listen, if Victoria Beckham isn't allowed to do the fashion show, I think it was quite interesting, because there was the Fendi show yesterday, and there was 130 people invited to it. And I'm sure all those people were very legitimate and, you know, what have you. But it was pinged all around the world. But what Sylvia, the designer at Fendi, said is that, you know, now is maybe not the time to be putting on these lavish fashion shows anyway. It wouldn't have been appropriate. So I think we've got to, right from the start, we've got to think about what is appropriate for the current pandemic. And actually, I looked at a lot of I did look at some of the London Fashion Week films, and they were really interesting.
Yeah, it gives you a different perspective, or draws you in more to the story.
Yeah, and you can, and you do look at the clothes, but you also look at the sort of the whole world behind the clothes. So you're thinking about the designer, and you're thinking about the whole craft process, which I think we've all forgotten about recently. And, you know, if you are going to invest, you know, you've got money, how are you going to spend your time? It's not just about spending money, it's spending time. And I think, you know, in a fashion show, which is over in just a minute, when you have a film, and I think I've got to say it now before I forget, what to me changed a lot of things was that haute couture Dior film in the summer. And I think that set a bar that I don't know who could better that. I mean, that's you know, that's what you do when you have hundreds of thousands of pounds and you work for a French, you know, giant. But I still think it's also, I loved some of the other films that came out of young designers in London. They were able to show a lot more diversity and inclusion. And I think that's what it's kind of about as well at the moment.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Any particular standout shows?
Well, I saw there was one called Art School, and apparently that was filmed a month ago. And I saw my friend Karen Franklin, and I love the way they had models of all different, not just shapes and sizes, but they had a couple of less abled people modeling, and that stood out to me because I felt that felt very modern. It didn't feel like it was gimmicky. I don't know whether Burberry worked for me. I found the Burberry film. It was a show as well. It was like a film because you had these men in their tuxedos, and I read the Tim Blanks write up, and that wasn't mentioned. And I think this is quite interesting for me, obviously as a writer, because you always are thinking about how you can connect with your reader. But a lot of, you know, fashion reports, if you're just a normal member of the public and you're tuning into fashion for the first time, I don't know what other people make of it. This is the thing. We're in a bubble in fashion, and now we're not in that bubble anymore. So I think when you're creating a film for a different audience, you've got to really think about that. So I think shows are going to change pretty much forever anyway.
Okay. Because I'm looking at the digital side of things. It kind of gives brands almost an instant global audience where they probably may not have had one before if it was only an in-person show.
Definitely. And, you know, I spoke to Martin Roberts, he is the organizer behind Fashion Scout.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's a sort of off, it's like off piste. It's not the main schedule, it's the other schedule, but it's where a lot of other designers who are international, they choose to come to London to show at Fashion Scout, because if you're Armenian, or if you're, you know, I don't know, from Ghana or anywhere else, you'd rather show at London Fashion Week because it's synonymous with actually being international. And I
Yes.
quite love that. So you might go on there to watch Erdem, but then you catch another less known designer that you fall in love with. There was, oh, I know what, there was a designer called Apujan, and I thought his show was amazing, and it was a bit Nick Knight. That's not,
Okay.
you know, and I thought it was, yeah, Apujan. I think I've kind of, it's been on the radar for a while, but
Okay. Happy Jam. I'm gonna have to look at that myself. Yeah. Um, so do you think fashion shows will always have a purpose?
well, funny you should say that, because John Walford, who is a show planner who did all the Vivienne Westwood shows for like 20 years, I asked him a similar thing, and he said, you know, back in the 1980s they said, oh, fashion shows are dead, you know, whenever we've seen the end of fashion shows, but here we are. And I think you're, you know, you're from the digital world as well, Hilary, and I think
Yeah.
that fashion has to be of the moment, doesn't it? Or it becomes a bit redundant. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think fashion shows are for different purposes now. They're to market the brand. They're to, you know, they're to sell Dior perfumes. They're not really, you know, the Karl Lagerfeld wonderful Chanel shows were about selling perfume. They weren't really selling the clothes. So I think
Right.
it's what we're down to is, you know, what is the purpose of a fashion show?
Mm-hmm. We have a question that's come in.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
think that people have a different expectations of fashion brands now compared to last September?
Yes, I do, because we're in a different world, aren't we? I mean, who'd have thought that we, you know, we're going around, it's nice we're not having to wear masks. Um, yeah, I think the world's changing. We are we are really contemplating things differently. I think fashion is going to have to change, not because everyone keeps on telling you it will have to change, but you know, it is quite a top poison industry that we need to address. We need to address all those bad things about fashion, carry on, you know, loving it, which we do. So I think that's going to have an impact. I mean, there were too many collections going on. There were
Right.
designers really burned out, you know,
Mhm.
and you know, why do you need to have all these drops? Do you need to have all these collaborations? I mean, collaboration here, collaborate. I mean, today Gucci announced a collaboration with something like North Face. I mean, why?
Right. Oh my goodness. I, amazing. Um, Now with this pandemic, it's slowed things down quite a bit. And I think personally, I think it's a good thing. And wouldn't it be great, unless I'm missing something, to have clothes within the natural season? Like now we're in autumn. I want to talk about autumn, not spring. Is
Yeah.
that, am I
No, well, I
am
mean,
I missing something?
not at all. I mean, listen, if we it's that way because in Paris you had the Chambre Syndicale who wanted to have the ready to wear seasons, and you'd have the show, and it was a trade show. Remember, catwalks used to be trade. They weren't for the general public.
Yeah.
And you know, you needed 6 months for all the clothes to be made and put in the shops, but you don't need that anymore. I mean, you can there's ways around it. I think that we have a craving for the new, but fashion's always been about craving the new, hasn't it? So and
Mhm.
I think you're right. I think nowadays it's about, you know, if you're a designer, you've got to also go straight to the customer. I think that everything's changed now. And so, yeah, I think you know, Marks and Spencer's saying, oh, you know, we're not doing well because we've got bikinis going in February and we've sold out of coats in August. But that's, you know, we're a different world, and we need to really rethink that system. And also we don't want the waste, you know, apart from anything else. We're not
Right.
quite sure of a sale. Is it a real sale, or is it, you know, well, we all know, don't we?
We do indeed. We do. Um, Now, with content and engagement, that's really important at the moment. Even it was always important, but even more so now. As a journalist, do you feel like you're in competition with influencers?
Yeah, I mean, I still, when I say to some people, oh, I'm a fashion journalist, and they say, oh, does that mean you're a blogger? Or, and I kind of say, well, I get paid to write, and I guess, you know, what it does an influencer get paid? I mean, that's my profession, but at the same time, I see what I do is I kind of, you know, I also get commissions where I have to really craft my words is what I sell rather than the brand, if that's what, you know, that's the way I see it. So a company will sometimes come to me for copywriting, and I use my 25 years of experience to put together a nice phrase that they can, you know, use for their marketing or something. And, you know, likewise, if I'm doing a report, I'll think about a beginning, a middle, of an ending, and I'll really craft that piece, and I'll go and interview people. I'm reporting on something, but it's not about curating myself. I'm kind of,
Right.
I don't really maneuver myself into pictures. Sometimes I do. I mean, I've been a columnist before, and in that case, you have to be, you know, your character is part of your work. But I think I don't underestimate influencers or bloggers, and I never have done, because, you know, I know how difficult it is to be a good writer, and I still always
Right.
think you can always become a better writer. So I think influencers, you know, good luck to them. I don't think it's an easy task, and I think if it's as hard a work as journalism, then, you know, it's tough. You're only ever as good as the last thing you do. So you're on it the whole time. You're making contacts, you're networking, you're trying out new things, and some things work and some things don't. And so where I think someone once described it as, you know, there's lots of stars in the sky, or there's lots of, you know, there's lots of voices out there. And I think there's room for all of us. That's not to say that my occupation has completely changed, which it has, because, you know, in the old days there was a fashion show and there was only room for 50 places. But, you know, that's then, and this is now.
Okay. Um, so the way things are, do you think journalists should be challenging whatever is considered norm, holding brands to account? Do you find that there might be a fear of backlash if you're too honest?
Yeah, I think this is the problem. I think that now that anyone can publish fashion, I think that there isn't enough specialism. And even, you know, you have really great writers like Susie Menkes and Tim Blanks, and they get wonderful interviews with Riccardo Tisci, and they get wonderful interviews. But, you know, you can't, if you're really pally with everyone and if everything's all jolly, how can you actually say, well, that collection wasn't great, what were you thinking of, you know? And I think all this sort of superficiality, I think there is a bit of a lack of critical, you know, analysis going on. I mean, there's an awful lot of, even this Burberry campaign, even the last show, you know, it was about a mermaid and a shark getting together, and yet it was shot in a field or the woods, And I think if you actually, you know, you needed someone to really, I think some of them said it wasn't the best Burberry show. I think that was as far as they got. But you know, crikey, when I think about when I first started, some of the journalists I worked for when I was their researcher, I mean, they were scathing about fashion review, you know, what collections were out there. And I think that I do feel sorry that that isn't the case anymore. I do think, you know, I think the average person in the street would appreciate a bit of analysis going on from someone who really knows their stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What
We've had another question come in.
what do you think?
In one sentence, how would you describe London Fashion Week, spring summer 21? Oh, I think we have technical. Here we are. Yeah. Did you hear that?
All right. Yeah, I say that again. Sorry, I missed that.
That's all right. In one sentence, how would you describe London Fashion Week, spring summer 21?
I think it was a seasonless. I think one of the I would describe it as the debut of seasonless fashion.
Which would be wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Next question. So I don't know how long ago this was, but during your master's research study,
Yeah.
one of your films you created,
Yeah.
I Create, Therefore I Am.
Oh, yes.
And it's a film promoting diversity in fashion.
Yeah.
Are you surprised how far we haven't come?
Yeah, I mean, my film was I was teaching at London College of Fashion and Central St Martin's, and I was very disappointed that there were so many there wasn't enough representation of a lot of. I used to go to lots of fashion events and I'd meet people from, you know, international, all over the world, and yet they wouldn't come and be fashion journalists. And yeah, I do think, I mean, listen, when I started out, my first job was on Vogue, British Vogue. And you know, it was very white and it was very aristocratic. And I know British Vogue now has Edward Enninful, of course, wonderful. But you know, I would like to see a lot more, because you know, writing is about stories and narratives, and some of the best stories come from hearing about, oh, I went, you know, some of my students had been to, I don't know, a family wedding, and you hear about all this wonderful sorts of stories from lots of different cultures. And I feel also I'm very lucky to have witnessed. I lived in the Middle East for a while in Abu Dhabi, and you know, the Arabs. I mean, they've been funding haute couture for years, very quietly and subtly. But you know, there's all this. Fashion doesn't have to be so Eurocentric either. I think that
Yeah.
I'm shocked that it hasn't come on so much, but I think that we're going to be seeing in the next 2-3 years many more you know, women and men who can give a different viewpoint on fashion as well. And it will be really interesting to see how designers, you know, I don't want designers to be creating clothes for stick thin, you know, models as well. I think that's a cop out. You know,
Yeah,
women have a bust, you know, get over it. Stop using these models that look like young men, you know, use women.
True.
That's
Very, very true.
That's my beef. But also, yeah, fashion needs to get a lot more, because it's going to be much more interesting as well, and representative of real people, and real people are really interesting. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just thinking about the shows, do you think at some point we will really see like men and women fashion weeks together? Because I don't understand why it's so separate.
Yeah, again, it was traditionally a trade thing, and the menswear shows were very, very different. In fact, there was a lot of snobbery. I think when I used to meet fashion editors who were menswear fashion editors, they'd slightly look down their nose at the women's wear. It's just an old sort of trade thing. I mean, funny enough as well, you forget, but there's so many very, very successful menswear companies, but they don't necessarily do fashion. They do something a lot more classic. And I think this is where the problem is. It'll be really interesting, you know, Kim Jones doing what he's doing for Dior, but really, what Dior sells are those really classic, you know, suits. I think what we can't lose sight of is that in all sorts of companies and businesses, you're going to have a high end, which is going to be, you know, really fashion and luxury, but then there's going to be something more commercial. And I think that will be interesting. But saying that, you know, I've got an 18-year-old son, and his generation, they're the Gen Z, or is it Gen Z? Yes, Gen Z, yeah. And that is going to be really interesting to see, because his friends it is that blurring gender. It's all of that going on, and I think. And I think there will be that sort of, you know, the boys are wearing pink sweatshirts. That, you know, someone said to me the other day that masculinity, femininity, it's a social structure. And if you consider, you know, how, depending on what, I don't know, country you're from, how you consider masculine, feminine, it's not really who we are. It's what our cultures say. So it will be really interesting to see what happens. But things are happening so quickly now, Hilary. I don't know what will happen next. I think it's quite fun to have men and women at the same time. You know, bit of you know. I think it feels quite now as well. It feels the time is right to have a bit of a sort of, you know, mix up on the catwalk.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of stories are journalists interested in now? How do we get your attention to write about us?
Well, I mean, I know I get a lot of brands coming to me and I say, yeah, but why should I be writing about your brand and not something else? So it's a lot about what's your point of view, what are you bringing to the table that's slightly different. And the thing is, sometimes they're a brilliant brand and they're doing really well, and you know, it's just, that's in fashion and that's what we're all talking about. But you can always, saying that, I mean, obviously I write press releases for some companies, and I always think of, you know, I immerse myself in the brand and I talk to the designers and I think, okay, what's different about you? And there you have it. What's that real core that's interesting? But sometimes you have to cheat a bit each season as well. You have to do a bit of a marketing spin and say, I don't know, something about, it could be something personal. I think we all want to know about the background of the designer, the struggles, right. Something that's a real, you know, we're all going through this pandemic. How did you spend lockdown? What did you see from your front window? I think that you can always find a story. Maybe that's it. Brand is story.
Right. Thank you. One more question for you. Now, you're a fashion journalist, yes, but you're also a senior lecturer of creative communications.
Yeah.
Now, is that a fancy way of saying journalism, or is there more to that title?
Well, I think that's a very good question, because what I teach now, or what I feel that it's fashion communication and promotion. So I feel that really it encompasses, I think, to make a living and to earn, you know, a crust of bread these days, you have to think more about the fashion industry, and you have to, what they call pivot, you have to diversify. So a lot of my students will end up going more into PR and marketing and, you know, lots of those things. They're all connected. You know, fashion is a huge industry, and there's lots of different disciplines. And, you know, think of it, social media now, there's lots of other, we all have skill sets that are different, and it's about working out what you feel you're going to be better at than someone else. But you know, a lot of I've worked on, I don't know, matches.com. I worked on for a while, doing the sort of newsy items as well. I think it's good if you have a fashion business, if you have someone who's quite good at picking out a story, or you know, you find the one that's the gossip, because that's probably quite good at social media. So yeah, it is creative communications is kind of what it sounds like, but it's, you know, some people like to keep things quite close to their chest. What you also have to do is try and narrow it down and throw out whatever is your brand message. And so yeah, so I do teach marketing as well. So
okay, thank you. And that was extremely quick. Thank you so much, Julia, for spending this time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Hilary, for asking me. It's been really interesting. I liked it.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Join us again next week. Our guest will be Editor-in-Chief of Pro Magazine, Leanna Grant. Until then, have a great evening. Thank you very much. Bye. Bye-bye.